This is the Women Emerging Expedition podcast, so you can follow the ups and downs and the roundabouts of the expedition and play your part in them. 24 women started on the 28th of May 2022 on this virtual expedition that will take 9 months. We are women from across the world determined to find an approach to leadership that resonates with women. We'll be successful so that women the world over will be able to say, if that's leadership, I'm in. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Julia Middleton, Expedition Leader. This episode is entirely it's a snapshot. It's the result of 10 conversations that I've had with 10 of the 24 women on the expedition about where we've got to, or rather where they've got to at this stage. We're calling it 2 months in, the end of chapter 1. We've been out talking to masses and masses of different people and collecting information and collecting insights. Now I'm asking them to bring those insights, that content, and bring it back into the kitchen. It's an analogy I've been using. We're not yet ready to bake a cake, which is going to be the approach to leadership that resonates for women. We do that in February. But at the moment, what we're doing is we're collecting ingredients for that eventual cake and putting them in the kitchen. So just before we jump into the kitchen and go and have a look what's there, just to note and to thank Aisha, who is one of the members of the expedition, who joined with me on our first expedition live call yesterday. We spent an hour with hundreds of people sending in their messages, asking us questions, everything from, how did you put the expedition together and how did you decide who was on it, to asking Aisha really tough questions about the difficult decisions she's made as a leader over the years. So the live was hugely successful. We've got another one in 3 weeks' time with Hinamoa. Do join that. But tell you more about that in a while. So back to what's in the kitchen. And first, let's go to Mona, because Mona is irresistible. She took the kitchen analogy much, much further than anybody else. Mona didn't just bring in ingredients. She brought in recipes that she was finding, and she gave us a recipe that she'd found full of ounces of this and dashes of that. But in amongst them all, there were 3 pinches. She was adding in her recipe, a pinch of exuberance, a pinch of visibility, and a pinch of humility. So I asked her to elaborate. After all, they're only pinches.
They are only pinches because they can alter the taste of what you fundamentally cook, right? Because we all know the importance of adding a dash of this and a pinch of that. For me, exuberance is really in discovering possibility. Some of us may feel that the current moment we're in is a disaster, but I feel like it throws us into the present and it gives us this ability to have a deep sense of connection. And even though it may feel like an unwelcome gift, we have some kind of a spiritual awakening where we are close in a way that makes us feel more alive. And that's the exuberance I'm talking about in this.
But it's tough producing that exuberance in tough times.
It is tough, but I think we have to look at the end game. It's a long game here. Nothing we do is going to be a short-term solution. So we have to keep that joy and that exuberance going.
So I understand the exuberance. Tell me more about visibility and humility.
I strongly believe that visibility and humility are 2 sides of the same coin. You can be humble about the work you do, but in order to really amplify the change you want to have, as I try with gender equality, you have to be visible so that people can see what they can be. And they aren't mutually exclusive. It doesn't mean that you are bragging or that you're showcasing yourself. You're really highlighting an issue so people can see the path to change. That's the balance between humility and visibility.
And lots of leaders struggle with visibility, don't they?
I think they do because it's a false narrative that if you're visible, you're not humble. And I don't think that's true. I think you can very easily be both. And that point was actually pointed out to me because as a child growing up in Calcutta, I worked with Mother Teresa. And someone said to me, well, isn't Mother Teresa both humble and visible? And of course she is. And I think that just switched it around for me. And I realized you can and must be both.
Next, I went to Katya. Katya is the youngest member of our expedition and has been really, really surprised, I think, about how the other members of the expedition have shared their emotions. And it has made her reflect a great deal on the power of what she calls inner work. So I asked her to explain the concept of inner work.
I think my understanding of inner work is taking time to reflect and understand oneself, understanding one's positionality, the way that we see the world and why we see it that way, but also understanding, what are our goals? What are our, what makes us feel alive? What makes us get up in the morning? What are the things that, we're excited about, that we love? What are the things that we stand for? And everyone that I've spoken to so far in this expedition, both within the sort of expedition team, but also people outside, I've just been, I think moved is an appropriate word actually, because I wasn't expecting to discuss emotion so much with people and to really get behind some sort of exterior and understand, or the fact that people have been willing to show themselves for who they are on a human level. I think that I wasn't expecting.
And inner work looks very different for different women in different cultures, different positions, isn't it?
Some people look to God or some sort of spiritual figure to connect with themselves also on a deep level. I know that, I do a lot of running in the mountains, right? Like that for me is a spiritual experience, and that for me is a way of doing inner work and becoming a stronger, more reflective, self-reflective person. Some people garden, like being close to nature, going for walks in the park, just all of these things where you take time to pause and to slow down, because I think by doing that, you're able to recalibrate. And speaking to different women as part of this expedition, recalibrate was a word that was used a few times, actually. It's like, where is your center and how does that guide you? And I think that that's extremely important for leadership, because...
So inner work is to find what's inside yourself. Good and bad, no doubt. Bad being some of the things that you need to sort of unlearn. And
yes.
I think you're saying that is a particular challenge for women?
I think it's a challenge for everyone, but I think that there are a lot of things that we as women need to unlearn, a lot of things that, by doing this inner work. And I'll just briefly, as a tangent here, I think that this inner work doesn't have to be independent. I think that that's also a key thing, that people can be doing this inner work together and learning from each other. And particularly when it comes to this unlearning, I think this is really where we can learn from each other, where someone can highlight for you, actually, you're behaving in this way where you are putting yourself at a disadvantage because you've been socialized to behave in this way. Again, as a very basic example, now looking for jobs and preparing for interviews and writing cover letters, looking at my male friends, the way that they write their cover letters, the way that they write their CVs, I've completely rewritten, how I used to present myself, thinking that perhaps things that I've internalized as a woman, socialized to be humble and quiet and, hope that people see behind this sort of passive exterior and actually realize that I am a good candidate for a particular position. No, you have to be assertive. You have to understand that you are worth it, and there's a difference between arrogance and being assertive in your worth. But this is also something that has come up speaking to women as part of the expedition, is that it's so important to know your worth and so important to know that you have a voice, and not all women have a voice, not all women are given the chance to use their voice, but those of us who can should, and I think that that's something that we need to consciously unlearn, is the barriers that society perhaps has put up, that actually we can overcome collectively.
Next, I spoke to Alia, who has also loved being part of this group of 24 women and has loved seeing things through other people's eyes. And a particular thing that she's spoken about that other members have shone a light on is that though we are focused on developing an approach to leadership that resonates with women, we're also, in effect, trying to cut through the perspectives about leadership that are anchored in the global north. Have a listen.
Yeah, as I've been meeting other members on this expedition and also just reflecting on my own leadership journey in different parts of the world, I've realized that many of the sort of prominent models of leadership that we see in the media are in the global north, often in the United States or Eurocentric. They're often male. So how do we start to think about leadership that would resonate not only in the global north, but more broadly? How do we think about leadership that's also not anchored in a world that has to be defined by capitalism as its only modality of being, or patriarchy as the only way of being, or sort of an East versus West concept as the only way of being? How do we start to think about these things differently? And it's been wonderful to be on an expedition with so many different brilliant people and hear their perspectives. The first group that I was in, I had a great conversation with Aparna, and we were really thinking about not just the way that we learn from our minds, but the way that we learn from our bodies, right? And it just made me think about how much wisdom there is in different parts of the world and how we need to almost decolonize our approach to leadership in general.
And that plays back into one of your deep beliefs that leaders need to learn to play. So I suppose in a way that's what the expedition is, 24 women playing.
Absolutely. I have a deep love for play and all that it brings, because it gets us out of our heads. It gets us out of our primary modality of thinking and doing, and it helps us connect with each other in new ways. It helps us connect with ideas in new ways and think differently. I mean, there's actual research out there that shows us that play isn't just good for children. We know it's good for children. We know that play helps develop the prefrontal cortex, which is important for all sorts of things, from regulating emotion to building relationships. But actually, play is really important for adults as well, and can help us build trust, can help us think outside of the box, can help us flip hierarchy and change power differential. And so if we are serious about changing a paradigm and thinking differently, we have to get out of the boardroom. We have to get out of, only doing things on pen and paper, or only thinking with our traditional minds, and instead move with our bodies. We need to play. We need to interact with each other differently so that we can reimagine what leadership could and should be.
And now on to Ana Luz and Isata. Ana Luz, who's seen something with real clarity, and Isata, who tries to, in a way, respond to it. I'm not surprised you're feeling a certain amount of indigestion at the moment. It makes sense, doesn't it, that there should be indigestion at this early stage of the expedition. We're just accumulating things in the kitchen. We're not trying to pull them all together yet. Anyhow, listen to Ana Luz.
I was thinking about women in activism, and I was thinking about women in politics, which are really important spheres of leadership, where women have had remarkable roles and where we need more women leading. And I find it in myself, that I would be hesitant to throw myself fully into those arenas, because I perceive them to be ruthless. I think leadership takes many forms. Sometimes it looks like a fight. Sometimes it looks like more coalition building or consensus building, working across difference, trying to bridge. Sometimes it is quiet, sometimes you have to be loud, and sometimes it's very hierarchical and sometimes it isn't. And I'm more drawn to the collaborative, bridging kind of work. And I deeply admire the women who have in them this energy to fight. I am here actually in South America where I grew up, spending time with family, and visiting right now with me is an aunt of mine who is the first woman mayor of one of the largest counties in the United States. And, I just see the level of energy and determination that this requires. Just talking to her about the work she does, it's really spectacular. It's remarkable. I think some of us are very attuned to our emotions, and in particular, perhaps seek harmony and want to build harmony among those around us. And so being in a confrontational state can be difficult, and yet probably is a key part of leadership. Through our explorations, we're going to find that there are many, many different ways to lead, and we need them all.
I took Ana Luz's admiration and thoughts to Isata, the politician, who must know a lot on this. And I asked her to what extent leadership is different when it's about a fight. Because the expedition members are definitely using the word collaboration a lot. And how relevant is the word collaboration when you're in a real fight? But first, I asked Isata, does politics have to be a fight?
It's an approach that you need to apply more often than you expect when you first get into politics, the fact that you have to fight. But what you realize very early on is that you have to first fight for the right to be there. And you have to fight for the right to do the right thing. And that's what you least expect. You expect that doing the right thing should be the most common acceptance that everybody has, that you'll be able to build a team around that because it's something that's going to benefit everybody. But it involves change. So change means loss to a lot of people, and therefore there's going to be resistance. So whether it's you actually being in a position of leadership means a change to somebody else that's no longer there, or you correcting some wrong in society, fighting against some injustice, there's a loss involved to a lot of people who've maintained that status quo. So you have to fight earlier than you expect and more often than you expect. But the fight seems almost natural to women who have chosen to be in an arena of change, because you understand that nobody wants to change, and you understand why it's so important that we continue along that change. How you fight makes a difference.
Explain.
And women still fight collaboratively, because you realize you're fighting with people you're fighting for. And sometimes you're fighting against people you're fighting for, because until you're able to sell that change to them, even those you're fighting for are not in agreement with your leadership or with your position or with your presence.
So fundamentally, the leadership of a fight is no different from the leadership of an organization or a community, but it perhaps just feels more violent.
It's more dangerous. It's more dangerous. Women in campaigns have been stoned and verbally abused, physically locked out of spaces. It's physically more dangerous. And now we have more ways to endanger women, both offline and online. And it's a danger to your character, to your reputation with the disinformation. It's a fight you have to be ready for in a very personal way, where maybe you don't have the protection of an organization or community because you're first trying to change a community or you're trying to change an organization. And it's just something you have to build up your own self-preservation. So when you wake up in the morning and the fight continues, when you go to bed at night, you have to do your own mental calculations and make sure you're mentally, emotionally ready for the next day's fight, because those who don't want the change, they don't relent. And you don't want to be fighting alone for the long time. You want to make sure that, you build resilience and resolve, but build people on your side to be able to help you to do that. So it still needs to be collaborative.
So the ingredients in the kitchen get more and more messy as more and more ideas come in. And many of them push the members of the expedition to think again, to think hard. I had a conversation with Anna. You seem to have questions in your mind on the link with motherhood.
Yes. I think because in my investigation so far about the features of women, that was the strongest feature, the strongest issue of femininity is motherhood as well. When I see women leader, I see very strong women, but alone. I don't know why I have this picture in my mind, alone on the stage, with no connection with her relatives, children, biology of being a mother, because I don't know, I see, a person who's making speech, who's strong in the professional environment. Where are the children in this picture? Is this the separate word, or how can we incorporate it and see it as an advantage in the professional portfolio? Not as a thing that we need to put to shelf, this is motherhood, so we need to keep it away. Or eventually put it sometimes as an anecdote or a characteristic of that person. When will be the point when the motherhood will be a normal and very much profitable and treated as a great point in the portfolio somehow? I got myself that I have a fear of being mother in the peak of my career. Why, as a woman, I can't see myself having child and having big things professionally. I know rationally I totally understand this, but emotionally I'm scared that it will somehow take away my identity. It's so strange. Even for me as a woman, I have fear of that in 21st century.
Now to Vidya. For Vidya, the expedition has really, so far, has held up a mirror for her. She wrote in a recent piece that nurturing with too much empathy is harmful. I asked her what she meant.
I think it came from what I've seen of myself, where when there's too much empathy, there is too much putting yourself in the other's shoes, to the extent that you find yourself always finding excuses for somebody else's underperformance or lack of understanding of your vision or the way you expect things to get delivered. And so you're always giving a lot more room than is required. And therefore, I felt nurturing had to be to the extent that you enable people to become the finest versions of themselves, but not so much that you keep compensating for what they don't do or that they don't understand. This has been my personal journey, where I feel that I suffered from complete lack of aggression, which I took refuge in because I felt aggression I don't like that trait. It's not only masculine, but it's something that I cannot be. But because of that, I was neither assertive. And so therefore, I had to fight an ineffective and not a very articulate battle for what I felt should be the way things should either be run or projects should be executed. And I think as I found myself to the journey to being assertive, I also felt that I was sometimes giving too much rope, because I felt, this is my new self, but maybe, they don't, a lot of people told me that they saw a very different me and they liked it. But I felt I needed somewhere to explain why this newfound me was being assertive. And in that sense, I was also being too nurturing. So I'm sorry, it's just sounding very confused and jumbled, but
I absolutely love that at this point in the expedition, we are jumbling and feeling our way, because if we knew the answers to them all, we wouldn't take months and months to do the expedition. So
right.
It makes a lot of sense. And the conversations you're having with guides is helping you weave through this.
Yes, absolutely.
If you're exhausted, keep going for a little bit longer. This is a long expedition. There are a lot of people on it. And hey, I'm only speaking to 10 members of the expedition. There are 24, think of it. So next, Yvette. Yvette has very strong, clear views on what leadership is. Absolutely clear in her head. But over the last few weeks, she has been speaking to a number of leaders who have transitioned from men to women, who were really senior male leaders and are now really senior women leaders. And I asked her how much these conversations have shifted her thinking about leadership. Yvette, when we first met, you talked to me about the things that you fundamentally believe about leadership. It's not gendered.
That's correct. In my opinion, at this moment in my journey, I think leadership is leadership is leadership. I think approaches might be different. I think styles might be different, but leadership, the ability to influence, take a team, organization, person through a journey, get the best out of them, to achieve a common goal. Leadership is leadership is leadership.
It belongs to everybody. So I believe in this one too so much.
Yeah.
It belongs to everybody. Yeah. Everyone's a leader. You believe that fundamentally, don't you?
Absolutely.
It's a lifelong pursuit.
For me, it is. I don't know if it is for everybody else, but when I say that lifelong pursuit of excellence in leadership, it to me is really about, I don't have all the answers all of the time. And it's such a rich and beautiful, for me anyways, topic. I'm always trying to be better, trying to learn more, taking account of how I'm leading at certain points and understanding there's so much room for learning.
But it's a hard lifelong pursuit.
Oh, yeah. Leadership is hard. And anybody who tells me that it isn't, I would question them and I'd question their particular approaches. Leadership, is just hard business. It ain't easy.
Now, as part of the expedition, you have been talking to a number of people who've transitioned from men to women, and they were very successful leaders as men and very successful leaders as women.
That's right.
Now, that is a complete, I wish I'd been a fly on the wall on all of those conversations, because they must have been fascinating. But I suppose, give us a glimpse into how much those conversations might be sort of undermining or putting question marks beside some of the things that you believe about leadership, or even adding a few more to it.
Yeah. I think what I learned was this, that my baseline assumption, my baseline belief that leadership is leadership is leadership was hardened. And I think both of those women would say that did not change for them. One of the things, though, the question mark is I keep hearing the word empathy come up over and over again. People want empathy from their leaders, from their bosses. Leaders want to be more empathetic. But in the case, for example, of one of the people that I interviewed, she talked about when she was a male in a male-dominated field. Okay, empathy, schmempathy. It was all about just getting the job done, task at hand, being adversarial, challenging, and in fact, had questioned when she started to transition, had said to herself, I want to be more empathetic, and started to become more empathetic, she clearly says some of that might have been the hormones I was taking, but really some of it might have been the woman that I was hiding. But she went out on a journey to be more empathetic, considerate, caring, understanding. And one of the things I thought was interesting was she called it worrying. She said, as a male, I didn't worry about nothing. I did my job. Here's a task. Let's go. Let's, charge the hill. As a woman, she found herself worrying after duty hours about the people, about the mission at hand, the achievements, et cetera, et cetera. And I thought that was interesting.
The word worrying is a sort of negative word, but was she using it as a negative, or was she actually? No, she wasn't using it negatively.
No, and I'd say the way that she talked about it was more about consideration. It was synonymous with consideration, and consideration about more things than just, charge the hill, so to speak.
The other thing that I've been picking up from you is women challenge? Do men challenge too much? Talk to me.
It was, interestingly enough, one of the key things that one of the transgendered women that I interviewed absolutely brought up, what she noticed on the other side, so to speak. And that is that women aren't as challenging as men. So she gave me this particular example that when, she is running her business that is male, in a male dominated field, the same field that she was in as a man. And, very challenged first day with a client, challenging what their strategy and where they want to go in the business, this part of their job to do that. She'd invariably get calls later in the evening by the women on her team that said, hey, can you believe what that guy said? Or, I think that we should have said this. And of course, she said, hey, why didn't you bring that up in the room? Why are you waiting now to tell me, and putting sort of the monkey on my back? And as she said that, I started to think about in my own life where I'd seen those examples.
So these conversations, they're putting a few question marks around your core assumptions, aren't they?
They are. I still hold on to leadership as leadership.
You see how lucky we are with our guides? Some amazing guides who are adding so much of our thinking. This was fantastic. On back perhaps to just a tiny snippet from Laura. She started a new job recently and has been putting a lot of the expedition into practice.
I started a new role at the beginning of July in a new organization. And I've had to make a huge effort in order to stay myself, which appears to have inspired people and it's got them excited about the future already. You might ask, why is that important? I was hired to do a job right. No, actually, I was hired to bring the best of myself and use that to influence the organization to change. And it's therefore absolutely vital that I don't assimilate to the company culture, especially in these really early stages. And I've realized that's actually really difficult to do that. And I feel really quite tired.
It's completely exhausting, isn't it? It's also a company that's predominantly male, in a sector that's predominantly male, isn't it?
Absolutely, yes. There's about 20% of the workforce is women in this company, but also in the sector, in fact, the amount of women is a lot less than 20%. So to turn up as yourself in a predominantly male environment and culture really takes a lot of effort and a lot of energy.
But it's worth it.
It's absolutely worth it because I've already seen the impact that it has on people, that they are excited about trying to capture a huge opportunity that we see developing in the UK with the energy transition.
But you also think that women have become good integrators. So actually, it's sort of almost counterintuitive for women not to try to integrate.
It's totally counterintuitive, because I think as human beings, but women in particular, is so good at adapting to new situations. And it's been a strength through evolution and has helped us survive many situations. But in order to create change, we really need to avoid this assimilation and really bring our true authentic self. And that has been really powerful. And I think because it's not our natural go-to position, it has therefore also been really quite exhausting.
So you see the kitchen is pretty full, a mass of ingredients all over all the counters. And I leave you, no doubt, completely full of indigestion and exhaustion. We certainly are, but we're raring to go for the next phase. The 24 women are back out, seeking more ingredients, with no attempt at this stage to make sense of it all. We're just collecting ingredients. Just to repeat, thank you for coming to the live session yesterday with Aisha. And as I say, in 3 weeks' time, it'll be with Hinama, date to be confirmed, date and time, but it'll be the week of the 15th of August. You can ask Hinama a mass of questions on the subject that she's chosen to go deep into, which is loosely motherhood and leadership. Look forward to talking to you next week on our next podcast, which I promise will be less indigestible. Lots of love.
Thank you for listening to the podcast. We would love you to follow the expedition and provide your own stories and perspectives. You can do this by subscribing to this podcast and joining the Women Emerging group on LinkedIn, where you can have your say.